Hey, what's up, VC? It's Steve again, Harmless Rebel. It's time for another episode of What's Spinning. Got a bunch of music to show, so let's just kind of jump right in. Let's see, where do I want to start? I guess we'll start with this one. So, I first heard about this in probably 97, 98. I saw an ad for this in one of the metal magazines. I went on to early eBay and ordered what I thought was a copy of it, and what I got was a burned CD. So this had to have been about 99, 2000 when I finally found a copy of it on eBay, because it would have been early eBay, and it was really 98, 99 before we started burning CDs. I remember I bought my first 2-time CD burner in 98 in Australia for about $400. It may have been $500. I mean, they were super expensive. They were in the thousands when they first came out in about 97. And by 98, 99, they started to become manageable under $1,000. And I was super psyched. I was DJing at the time in clubs in Japan and on the bases. So it was really nice to be able to burn mixtapes and sell those as opposed to actual mixtapes, which is what we were selling prior to that. Anyway, but at 2 times they took forever to burn. It would take me a whole weekend to make the 10 or 15 tapes that I needed to have with me all the time at shows. Anyway, I ended up getting a burnt copy of this, and I was pissed because it sounded like shit. And I had heard that the actual unofficial pressing sounded really good, and it does. This is Bay Area Thrashers, the early days. This is basically a soundboard performance from the UK, and this is with Mustaine and Ron McGovney. So this is before Cliff Burton. I was super stoked to finally find a copy of this. I found it in the wild for, I think I paid $5.99 for it. So I was super stoked, and a very cool piece to have. If you can find a copy of this, it's definitely worth having. I love Kill 'Em All. Kill 'Em All is my second favorite Metallica album behind Ride the Lightning. But I love the speed and the aggression of the songs with Dave Mustaine in the band. And I love the mechanics when played by Metallica. Now, I love Four Horsemen too, don't get me wrong, but killer CD. Next up, Prong. I've talked about Prong a bunch of times. I am a huge fan of them. This is their, I believe this was their second official release. This is still when they were more in that hardcore thrash phase, thrashcore, I guess you could call them. This is Force Fed. There's a few songs on here that are more that hardcore sounding Prong, and the rest of it is more thrash. I pretty much love all eras of Prong. My favorite is that mid era where they were mixing in some funk, they were mixing in industrial, straight up metal. The snap your finger, snap your neck stuff. I love that era. A close second is this early hardcore thrash era, and this is a great CD. And this one is hard to find. This is the original pressing on CD. This is one of those, and there's a few I'm going to show you here. So just on a side note, I'll show a few here, and I'll show a few in another update. But one of my local CD store, used CD stores, bought a huge collection, like 500 pieces. And they split it between their 2 stores. And I've gone to both their stores and bought a crap load of albums. I quite a few. I've got stacks here I haven't listened to yet. A lot of it's really rare, really hard to find CDs. And a lot of these, for instance, this one goes for $25 to $40 on CD. I also have this on vinyl that I paid $10 for. So a lot of these are actually rarer on CD than they are on vinyl. But just really good album. But anyway, yeah, there was so much rare stuff. I mean, I've got some CDs here that go for $60, $70. And I don't think I paid more than, there's a couple I paid $7.99 for. Almost all of it I paid $5.99 for. So it's one of the things I love about this particular store. I go to a lot of the vinyl, a lot of the really rare vinyl that I get from there. So anyway, Force Fed from Prong. Next up, I've talked about this album a bunch of times. This is one of my favorite albums from Overkill. But Horoscope, an original pressing with the green. Next up, The End, the final show for Black Sabbath, February 4, 2017. Is that the final show? It says on the back it is. I thought that they toured throughout 2017, but maybe not. Maybe this was a final show. It's a good show. There's a few songs on here where Ozzy doesn't sound great. Actually, on the first song, Black Sabbath, he's off of the music for almost the entire song. But as a whole, it's still a good show. It's still a nice piece to have in the collection. I'll still listen to it, but I mean, when I really want to listen to live Sabbath, I'll probably pull out stuff like the live CDs from here, which are phenomenal. But still worth having. It's Black Sabbath. I want everything that they've ever released. So I don't know that it's worth the $50 or whatever this costs on vinyl. I think it's a 3 or 4 record set, and if I remember correctly, it's pretty expensive. It's worth the $7.99 that I paid, or $6.99. This was a really cool one. I was actually really shocked to see this because I have never seen. I've known about this. I've been looking for it for years, and I never see it. This is Nevermore. This is In Memory EP. If I remember correctly, this came out right before their second album. I'd have to look online. It may have come out between their second and third album. But just a really cool EP, all originals. Let me double check. Pretty sure they were all originals. Yes. Nope, I lied. Silent Hedges is a Bauhaus cover. This is one that may be harder to find. I believe it was only released in Germany, but it is a must-have if you're a Nevermore fan. This is another cool one that I just recently found that I didn't know existed. This is live in Graz, Austria in 1975. This is David Coverdale era Deep Purple. Man, this is so good. I've probably got half a dozen live Deep Purple albums from this era, and whether it's with Coverdale or whether it's with I can't think of his name right now, Ian Gillan, or whether it's with Gillan, this mid to late 70s era, or early to, no, I guess mid, probably about 73 to about 79. All the live shows I've heard are just phenomenal. This one is really, really good sound quality. Who was this one done by? Eagle Records. And a good portion of the live albums that I've been finding over the last few years, Eagle Records or Steamhammer, usually have something to do. But this one's Eagle Records and Universal Music Group. Definitely worth checking out. So this one. So when I saw this, I really wanted it. I did not want to pay the $99 that it's going for. For the albums. The box set's $99. I think even this way it's $29. I was lucky enough to find it used for $12. But this is the White Album from the Beatles. This is the new deluxe edition that just came out late last year. That includes the Beatles, or the White Album and the Escher demos. They just did a killer job with this. Pull this out so you can see it. It's got a couple of really nice inserts. This one's a little fold out with photos and lyrics. And then you've got this really nice book here that's just filled with the stories of the recording sessions and all the pictures. I mean, they did a really killer job on this. If I find the used LP box set for a good price, I'll buy it. But man, this thing sounds phenomenal. The Escher demos are basically the demos from the album. They're all raw. If you're familiar with what were the Beatles? Can't think of the name of the albums. They did that series of albums back in the 90s with all the outtakes and demos and stuff like that. It's that type of stuff. It's all really raw, really stripped down, and really, really good. I love the Escher demos. This album's already one of the best albums ever. And even though I would never take away from the originals, a lot of these demos, I think the rawness of them sounds even better. And there's a couple songs. What's the New Mary Jane? There's a couple songs on here that weren't on this album, and then they've got some stuff that was on later albums. So very cool though. I bought this for $12.99. Definitely a must-have for any Beatles fans out there. This is another one I picked up that same day. I picked this up for like $6.99. This is one of those moment in time albums that just always takes me back to this period. This is the what is this? The Anniversary Deluxe Edition, but this is Jagged Little Pill. I love that album. I remember hating all the songs when they first came out, and they just played so much that they just kind of grew on me over time. I mean, you couldn't get away from them in the mid-90s when this came out. I think this was, I want to say it was 94, 95 time frame. But they remastered the first album. The second album is all demos and previously unreleased songs. It was a good listen. There's a reason none of those songs made the album. It really is just one of those perfect albums that just came out at that perfect time. Let's see, where should we go next? Next up, back to the metal. Let's go here. This one was a really cool one. I just picked this up the other day. I had never seen this. So I've been a fan of Gravedigger since probably the early 90s. But all I had ever listened to until 3 or 4 years ago was their 80s albums. I always dug their 80s albums. And then they put out the Digger album, and they kind of lost me, and I just never really looked into them after that. Now I do kind of like that Digger album. I do have that in the collection. But over the last few years, I've been picking up their later albums. And this is one, like I said, I just recently picked this up. This may be one of my favorite Gravedigger albums. This album is so good. And this one is called The Gravedigger. This is the Digipack edition. It's an embossed cover with the Gravedigger. You can't really see that, but there's a little crow or raven on his shoulder. And this one is you can kind of, I don't know if you can see it, but here it says in memory of Edgar Allan Poe. And Edgar Allan Poe is kind of the can't think of the word I'm looking for. All the songs are written with him in mind. So you've got the song Raven, the Gravedigger. It's a really dark album, and it's really really good. This is the original cover. If you buy the CD edition, I just think this looks so much cooler. But definitely a must-have. This album is just, it's great. Like I said, this may be my favorite Gravedigger album. Let's see what we got next up. So this one is not one I recommend you go out and buy. This album, It's funny. I looked for this album for years on eBay. I tried to find it on CD Now back before that was bought up by Amazon. I remember loving this album. And then I listened to it. And other than the intro, which was really something, what I really remember about this album, I don't really like any of the songs. It's still a good nostalgia listen, but I'm actually kind of amazed that these guys got signed, because when you compare them to the other metal bands that Megaforce was dealing with in the early '90s, these guys just aren't even on that level. They call themselves industrial metal. They're really not. There's not much industrial, other than the way they structure their riffs and stuff. It's kind of droning, kind of like some of the industrial bands. But they don't use any of the industrial sounds or effects that many of the industrial bands from this era use. But this is Stupid People Shouldn't Breathe. Stupid People Shouldn't Breathe from Skate Nigs. Still, the best thing from this album is the Chemical Imbalance intro. And I don't remember who. Does it say who it is? No, it doesn't really say. If you've never heard this album, it's worth checking out that intro. But, again, that's a nostalgia buy. Not one I recommend picking up. Just, again, filling out the Motorhead collection. Picked up Rock and Roll. Always love this. Rock and Roll, Eat the Rich, Black Heart. Such great songs. Just Because You Get the Power was a really cool B-side. The B-sides are on here as well. So again, just slowly filling out that Motorhead collection. When was this? 2001. Save that. This is another one. This album is so good. And I don't know why this doesn't make more people's lists. This is just really killer thrash. Bordering on death. So good. When was this? 88 when this came out? Yeah. 88. This album is so amazing. If you're a fan of thrash and you've never heard this, I highly recommend picking up a copy of this. This is an absolute classic. But this is Forward Determination from Sacrifice. Such a great CD. I like everything about this album. I think this is by far their best album, but I think you could grab any of this era of Sacrifice and you'd be happy. And I still see these guys get put in with the death metal bands, but they're definitely not a death metal band. It's definitely thrash, but they do have that aggression that you would see in the early death metal bands. But again, Sacrifice, highly recommend that one. Next up, Canadian thrashers, Dead Brain Cells. This is another one that goes for a lot of money. This one goes for $25-30. I believe they only released 1,000 of these. What happened was after the second album, Dead Brain Cells broke up. They had gone into the studios and done some demos for a third album, but that third album was never released. Well, when was this? 2002. A couple of the guys got together and released DBC, Dead Brain Cells, unreleased. This is really good. Very much in line with their first album. It's got that rawness of their first album. I don't believe this was ever released on vinyl. I think the only way you can get it is the CD. But if you're a fan of Dead Brain Cells or just that era thrash, it's really, really good. Just really good straight up thrash. Next up, take it back out of the metal realm. This album right here is literally one of the best albums ever made. It usually makes the top 20s, top 30s best album lists. I've seen this in the top 5 before. This really is just a perfect album. I think this is the best thing to come out of Motown. I love every song on here. This is just, it's so good. But this is the deluxe edition of What's Going On. From Marvin Gaye. It also comes with a live album. Where is it? Live at the Kennedy Center, May 1st, 1972. And then there's also 3 or 4 original singles. And it says, is it 2 mixes of the album? I have to look at this. I can't remember. It was a couple months ago when I listened to this. I think there's 2 mixes of the album on here. Let's see if it says. Yeah. So they got the original LP release. They've got the original mix from Detroit before it was remastered for the final release. And there are slight differences, if I remember correctly. Not enough that, I mean, when you're listening to it, it sounds more like you're listening to the album twice, which is fine. I actually listened to it 3 or 4 times. That first week I got it. And then, let's see, Live at the Kennedy Center. Original versions, the single versions of What's Going On and God Is Love, which are 2 of the great all-time R&B songs. And then a track called Sad Tomorrows, which I think was... No, I'm sorry. And then In the Meantime, which was a previously unreleased track. Definitely worth having. Like I said, I think this is the best... not the best songs. I think there's some better songs that came out of Motown, but albums as a full, or as a whole, this is by far the best album that Motown released. Let's see where we want to go. Next up, let's see where we at. We'll keep going. This is one I'm really glad this sticker was here, because I would have passed by this, and I'm so glad that I did not, because this is a killer album. This is called Dr. Butcher. And it says on here, new band of Savatage's John Oliva. Had I not seen that sticker, I mean, this does not look like a metal album. I would have thought nothing of this. This is basically early Savatage. I'm not saying it's the members of early Savatage, because I believe, what year was this? Well, 94. I can't remember if his brother had died at that point or not. But regardless, there's a couple... I think it's 2 of the guys from Savatage in here. Really cool. Very reminiscent of that early era of Savatage before they got into the more theatrical stuff that they got into later on. Killer. Just straight up metal. And really enjoyable. If you're a Savatage fan, it's one you need to grab. Another real rare one. I was really surprised to find this. This was later released with a new cover. Actually, don't I have another one of their albums? This is the debut album from heavy metal band Wolf. Wolf is such a good band, and I'm surprised I don't hear more about them. I have heard them. I have seen them pick up a little more popularity. I've seen people show their last album or 2. But man, going all the way back to this first album. It was their 3rd or 4th album when I first got into them, and I loved it. And, it had to be 2007, 2008. And then I saw this, and I didn't recognize it at first. I know the band Wolf, but this is before they created their metal logo, which is, this is the, I don't know if you can even see that. This is the logo that they've been using since their 2nd album. On the original release, though, this is the cover, and I actually love this cover, but I just don't like the script of the wolf. I wish they would have just kept this original cover and used this script right here. But this is another one. I'm trying to find all their albums, and I was really shocked to run across an original pressing of this, and I think I paid $3.99 for it, Really killer album, though. Wolf has not disappointed. Every one of their albums have been on point. This one is the Black Flag, or the Black Flame. This is 2006, so it's probably about 2003 when I got into it, because I want to say this is their 4th or 5th album right here. But highly recommend both of these. And this is a band that's been consistently awesome. It's not like they were okay here and they just got better, or vice versa. They were on fire here, and at this point, they were still killing it. Next up, a little bit of Johnny Cash. I couldn't pass this up. I love promo copies, and to see a promo copy of the American recordings from Johnny Cash for I think I got this at Goodwill. So what $2 or $2.50, whatever they charge for CDs. But I love the Rick Rubin releases on American Recordings. Highly recommend those. This next one was kind of a shock to me. So I'm not a huge fan of this guy. He's got a lot of songs I absolutely love. He's got 2 albums that are favorites of mine, but I've never really explored his catalog. And as I run across the SACD pressings used, because I can usually get them for $6 or $7, I grab them. And this is one I grabbed. And I've heard people talk about this. This was during his religious period. He was saved back in, what year was this? This was 79. So probably mid-70s. And he had a 3 or 4 album period where it was about him being saved. And I wasn't sure what to expect, because the album Saved I'm not really a fan of. This album is so good. Slow Train Coming. The first 2 songs on here, Gotta Serve Somebody and Precious Angel, are worth the price of admission by themselves. This is one that I'm going to look for the MoFi vinyl pressing of. I really want to get this one on vinyl now. Highly, highly recommend picking this one up if you like anything that you've heard from Bob Dylan. Really, really good. Now we'll go here. Got a 2 from this guy. First up, I've talked about this. I pre-ordered this on the clear vinyl 4 months before it came out. I was actually listening to this when the news broke at like 2 o'clock in the morning our time that he had passed away. It was the craziest thing that me and my wife were listening to this album. But this is Black Star from Bowie. They had a copy of it at the store for like $4.99. I didn't have it on CD, so I grabbed it. I absolutely love this album. Kind of a mix of the 90s Bowie and the Berlin era. The Berlin era, if you've watched me long enough, you'll know that's my favorite era of Bowie. I love the 3 Berlin albums. I think they're 3 of the best albums ever made, especially Heroes. This is a must-have. And then along with that, this is another cool one. I actually have this one on vinyl as part of one of the box sets. But this is Santa Monica 72. And this is him right in the middle of Ziggy Stardust. And it's phenomenal. All of the songs are here that I love. Space Oddity, Ziggy Stardust. I mean, just killer live set. This one was done by Dead Quick Music. Never heard of it. Trident Music International in the UK. Really, really good. Let's see. Oh, in the background. In the background, I don't know if you can even hear it. We're listening to Pariah. This is another album that I picked up. I picked this up for $5.99. If you look online right now, you can't get this in this condition. This thing was mint. You can't get this for under $50. If you're not familiar with Pariah, this is a debut from Pariah. Pariah is Satan, the band, the new wave of British heavy metal band Satan. They changed their name, and I believe this was '88, and adopted more of a speed metal / thrash sound. I'm not a huge fan of Satan. I don't dislike them. They're just not a go-to band for me. Their speed thrash stuff is amazing. This album is so good. They released 2 albums in the 80s. They got back together in the 90s before Satan came back, and they did one more as Pariah. If you can find a copy of this, it's actually much cheaper. You can get this on vinyl. I think I saw it for $20. This is a must-have if you're a thrash fan, if you're a fan of Satan. Just such a good thrash album. Oh, let's fly through the rest of these. Next up, just some straight-up metal. This is another kind of hard to find one that I grabbed as that collection. This is the Iron Savior debut. Next up, they just reissued these. I know a lot of this is one of those bands people love to hate. I love their stuff from the 70s. But this is the Hotel California remastered. It comes with disc 2 as a live album from '76. Phenomenal sound quality. It's awesome. This is my second copy of this. This is actually a German pressing. I also already have a US pressing, so I'll probably put one up on for sale. I'll listen to them, see which one sounds better. Again, pretty expensive albums, and I picked these up for really cheap. But this is Under the Jolly Roger from Running Wild. This one's a couple years old. This is from Helix. I don't remember what year this one was. 2009. This is a great album. I'm really glad that SMF Captain Howdy got myself and Scott and a couple of other guys back into Helix, because the stuff they're releasing now is really, really good. My favorite stuff from Helix is actually the early 80s, where they still have that 70s sound, and then this era. It's just really good bluesy hard rock. And man, I like I said, I love the stuff that they're releasing now. But this is Vagabond Bones. Next up, we got a little bit of Hammerfall, Legacy of Kings. Again, just trying to fill out my Hammerfall collection. Just really good power metal there. Animal House from Udo. I've got this on vinyl. I believe I have this on cassette. But this is a German pressing on CD. I wasn't going to not grab it. This one is cool. This is actually a Russian bootleg, which I didn't know when I bought it. I only paid like $3.99, so it's not a disappointment. It sounds phenomenal. But I was shocked how good this album is. This is from '97, and this is Whitesnake. I had never listened to any of their stuff from the '90s. Wasn't really interested. I love the '80s, especially the '70s Whitesnake. This is really, really good. I would put this up there with any of their best stuff. I was really shocked how much I like this album. But this is Restless Heart. And again, this is a Russian bootleg. It's got 3 extra songs that weren't on the other albums. But I do want to find an actual copy of this now. But I highly recommend checking that one out. Just another Suicidal. I didn't have this one on CD. I only had it on vinyl. So grab that as well. Art of Rebellion. I believe this is the first Suicidal album I bought. This was really the one, yeah, '92, that got me into them. I love this album. So we're down to the last 2. This is one. I picked this one up for $7.99. This is another one that goes for like $40. Apparently this was really limited pressing. It's only been pressed once, but this is the debut, I believe, from Blackberry Smoke. It's in mint condition, and like I said, I paid $7.99 for it. Really good. If you're not familiar with Blackberry Smoke, they're kind of a southern rock, I guess is the 70s style southern rock band. Mix in a little bit of bluesiness, like Government Mule type stuff. And then last but not least, this album is great. This was a 2018 release. I wish I would have gotten this before I did my best of 2018 album, because this album would have made my top 10. It's so good. I saw it on a lot of people's top 10s. A lot of people talked about how it was progressive death. I heard people talking about how there were some Bowie influences. I heard that there were some Pink Floyd influences mixed in, and that kind of piqued my interest. So I found it for $5.99 and I grabbed it, and it's amazing. This is such a great album. This is Rivers of Nihil. What's it called? Where Owls Know My Name, which is great if you think about, because owls say who, where they know my... Anyway. Killer album. Definitely some melodic death in there. Definitely some progressive death in there. A lot of people call it technical death. I'll call it progressive death. It's not really technical. When I think of technical death, I think of real technical guitar riffing, and I don't really hear the real... I'm not saying that there's not guitar good... There's some really killer riffs on here. They're just not real technical riffs. What makes this more progressive is the drums. He's all over the place with the time signatures, gives it a really cool sound. The music's really dynamic. It ebbs and flows and through songs, not just through the album. I will say there's a couple songs. Song number 4 comes to mind right away. Old Nothing, where the drummer goes overboard and he's just going 90 miles an hour for almost the entire song. Other than that, this is about a perfect album. And the Bowie influence is, again, I talked about that Berlin era. They're definitely influenced by that Berlin era Bowie. I think they were listening to it while they were writing this, because there's some saxophone in here that's very reminiscent of the saxophone that's on the B side of Heroes. Some of the background atmosphere definitely has a Pink Floyd feel to it. If you're into progressive metal, if you're into technical metal, if you're into progressive death metal, you're going to like this album. It's not all... There are some slight death vocals, but not really. This is... They're considered a technical death album or band, but I wouldn't go all the way to the death side of it. Again, regardless, check this one out, guys. This is a really killer album, really worth your time. And I think just about all of you that watch my channel will find something in this album that you like. That's it, VC. This went on a lot longer than I planned, but I hope you saw some new stuff here worth checking out. If you got any recommendations for me, let me know. Take care, and I'll see you soon.